I found him curled on the bathroom floor, shaking, whispering to himself like a man who had lost his mind. His bare chest heaved as he gasped between sobs. "I am dying, Sandra. I am dying." At first, I thought it was another one of his late-night drunken breakdowns.
But there was something different this time.
His eyes, usually full of calculated rage, looked wild with fear. His phone lay shattered beside him, and the mirror was cracked, as if he had punched it. I stood frozen, gripping the doorframe, watching the man I had spent 15 years tiptoeing around unravel like a child. I should have felt something.
Pity.
Anger. But all I felt was a sinking numbness. Then he looked up at me. "They found it. Stage 4, he said. Pancreatic." I remember the words, the way they pierced through the cold air like a knife, and the guilt that followed, heavy and suffocating. Because just 3 hours earlier, I had packed a bag and planned to leave him for good. But he knew that. And suddenly, I was not so sure he was not faking it. Thank you so much for being here. Whether you are a new viewer or someone returning to this channel, I appreciate you more than you know. If you have already subscribed, thank you from the bottom of my heart. And if you're still thinking about it, I cannot wait for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support is the fuel that keeps this channel going. Do not forget to like this video, drop your thoughts in the comments, and share it with someone who might need to hear this story. Now, let me tell you how everything began falling apart. My name is Sandra. I am 38 years old, and I live in a quiet little town in Iowa. For most of my adult life, I've been married to Charlie, my husband, my first love, and the man who slowly destroyed my self-worth. He is 41 now, and for years, he made me believe that I could never do better, never survive without him. It started small, gaslighting, silent treatment, blame games. But over time, it became a daily ritual of walking on eggshells, of losing myself piece by piece. I stopped seeing friends. I stopped smiling. I stopped dreaming. The week before the bathroom incident, I found my old journal tucked away in a box. Reading it felt like a window into a woman I had forgotten. It gave me strength. I called my sister Diane, made a plan, and decided I would leave while Charlie was away on a work trip. But he never left. Instead, he came home early. And that was when the cancer story began. He handed me a folder filled with papers and scans, medical records, a diagnosis. My knees buckled as I flipped through it, but something in my gut said, "This is a lie." I stopped packing that night. Instead, I tucked the suitcase back into the closet and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the folder Charlie had given me. The words pancreatic cancer, stage 4 stared back at me like a death sentence. Not his.
Mine.
I did not sleep. I just watched him all night. He lay curled up in bed, groaning in pain, breathing heavily like a man fighting to live. And I hated myself for doubting him. By morning, I had become his nurse. I cooked his meals, ran his baths, held his hand during fake coughing spells. And every time I looked at him, a voice inside me whispered, "He is lying." But what if he is not? I could not risk being the woman who walked out on a dying man.
Charlie used that.
He fed on my guilt, made it his weapon. If I left the house for too long, he would text me pictures of himself slumped in a chair or say he had vomited blood. When I cried from exhaustion, he reminded me that he could die any day now. "You will feel it for the rest of your life, Sandra," he said once, while I was folding his laundry. "You will always remember you left me when I needed you most." My sister Diane came over one afternoon and immediately sensed something was off. I told her everything, how I had been about to leave, how Charlie claimed he was dying. She listened quietly, her arms crossed, eyes narrow. "Where is he being treated?"
She asked. "Some specialist."
"Dr. Patel," I replied, my voice trembling.
"Where?"
I hesitated. I could not remember the name of the clinic. Charlie had never let me come with him. He always said it was too depressing, that he did not want me to see him like that. Diane was not buying it. He is manipulating you, Sandra. You know that, right? I wanted to scream at her. Or maybe I wanted to scream at myself for needing her to say it out loud. A few days later, Diane called me from the parking lot of the clinic listed on one of Charlie's papers. "There is no Dr. Patel here," she said flatly. "And they have never heard of Charlie." My world went still. My hands shook as I ended the call. I turned to look at Charlie, who was in the living room moaning, holding his stomach like he was on the edge of death. I realized then I had been taking care of a man who was perfectly healthy and perfectly cruel. That night, I waited for him to fall asleep. His fake groans grew softer until he was snoring peacefully, like a man without a single care in the world. I crept into the hallway, pulled out the folder he had given me, and took a closer look.
It was printed, yes.
It had logos, signatures, and even a date of diagnosis. But something felt
off.
The font was slightly different on each page. The scanned image looked like something I had seen online. I opened my laptop. With shaking fingers, I searched for the name of the oncologist. Nothing. Then I looked up one of the scans. My heart dropped. It was from a medical blog posted 3 years ago. The exact same image Charlie had shown me. I clutched the folder to my chest and sat on the floor, sobbing. He had lied. About cancer. About dying. About everything. The next morning, I confronted him. I did not scream. I did not cry. I just stood there, folder in hand, and said, "You lied to me. There is no cancer, Charlie." He looked stunned. For a moment, he tried to keep the act going, clutching his side, wincing in pain. But then I saw it. That flicker in his eyes. That same look he gave me whenever he realized he had gone too far. He dropped the act. "Fine," he spat. "Yes, I told a lie.
But you were going to leave me, Sandra."
I had to do something. "I love you." "Love?" I whispered. "You call this love? You were going to abandon me like I was nothing. I needed you to stay." I stared at him. This man I once thought was the love of my life. All I saw now was a scared, broken boy in a grown man's body, desperate to control whatever he could. He fell to the floor again, crying. But this time I felt nothing. I picked up my suitcase and walked out the door. Diane was waiting in the car. I got in without a word, and as we drove off, I realized that for the first time in years, I could breathe. It took months to rebuild myself. I went to therapy. I cried in Diane's arms. I learned to forgive myself for staying too long and for doubting my own instincts. But I survived. And that is why I am sharing this. Because someone out there might be carrying guilt that does not belong to them. Let this be your sign. Get out.
Breathe. Live.
Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please remember to like this video, comment your thoughts below, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world, and it keeps these stories alive.